Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back once again. This morning we're privileged to have our regular monthly speaker, Jim Wilson, who is the former abbot of the Chogye Zen Center in New York and is currently acting as the chaplain at the Napa State Hospital for the criminally insane. Before we let Jim start, let's start with brief introduction, and the way we do that is we start, and each person says his name. So can we start with you?
Jim.
With me, Michael.
David. Rockmail.
Brother Max.
David. Richard. Bruce.
Gary Lane. Peter.
Jack.
Paul.
Jim.
Hal. Steve.
Dina.
George.
Will. Greg. Michael.
Mark.
Snake. Paul. Tom.
Nicholas.
Bob.
Clint.
Michael. Bob.
Good morning. I seem to have come down with a cold, so I hope you'll bear with me if I start sniffling and snuffling and all that sort of thing. But do people have any Dharma questions that they would like to bring up at this time? Yes.
It's about a friend of mine who recently decided to go back to school, so he joined the Culinary Academy. And this class, he's 4 years old, and in this class, there's this 20-year-old boy who kept making fun of him, and, calling him queer and fairy, and just really awful stuff. And finally, during one of the classes, my friend is allergic to peppers, so he rimmed his wine glass with some kind of pepper without his knowing, and my friend had this big reaction. Anyway, he confronted him, and nothing happened, and then so he went to the director of the school, and he said something has to be done about this guy, but nothing was done. In the end, he had to sort of contend with what it was and change classes. When he told me the incident, I was like totally incensed. I was just so angry. I wanted to go in and just kick this boy's butt, whatever. And I wondered, how does Buddhism address this problem when we're faced with, as gay men, we are faced with this kind of problem, even in San Francisco in the year 2002.
So, how does Buddhism deal with dealing with anger or dealing with hostility?
Yeah, exactly. So when something comes up like that in front of your face, I couldn't send metta to this guy and say, I can't do that.
No, I understand. So
I'm wondering, Buddhism being very practical, what is the advice for this kind of thing?
For that kind of situation, I would recommend cultivation of equanimity. And also the realization that human beings are not separate from nature. So the contemplation I would recommend, I call it the empty boat contemplation. I don't know you, I don't know your friend, so I'm just speaking off the top of my head. And so the empty. I understand. This is my response without knowing the situation, knowing you or your friend. Okay? So the empty boat contemplation is if you're going downstream in a boat and a boat bumps into you and the boat is empty, you simply push the boat out of the way and continue downstream. If you're going downstream and a boat bumps into you and there's someone in the boat, all sorts of things bubble into the mind, like, how could you be such an asshole? What a fool you are! But the situation is the same. What I'm getting at is that human beings who make our life difficult are not different from other things which make our life difficult, and that's the key to equanimity. You can't control everything in life, and you can't control other human beings, and where they're at. So, in order to maintain one's stability and clarity, it's necessary to develop that kind of equanimity. Equanimity is not approval. Okay? I want to make that clear, that equanimity is not approval. But equanimity allows one to keep one's center and one's clarity, and then from that centeredness and clarity, it is possible to act and respond to the situation without getting swept away by it. So that's what I would have to offer on that. Yeah.
Actually, you raised one of the Buddhist stories that has always been slightly puzzling for me, and I think has larger implications about our perception of existence, because I've read that story before, and what struck me is that's not the way I react, and that's not the way I think many people react. When our computer, for example, crashes, we don't say, nobody there. We get angry.
Don't take my story so literally. It's just an example. Okay.
No, but I mean, it's a prototypical story, and the story says that we only get angry at people and at volition or conceivably other sentient beings, but actually we get angry when we walk out and it rains, and when we trip on the sidewalk, and when we're surfing and the waves aren't high enough or whatever. So what does one say about that?
When you read The Ugly Duckling, okay, the message of The Ugly Duckling, is not contingent upon ducks or swans. So it's an illustration of a point. The story I told, don't be so literal about it. Sometimes certain situations make us angry, sometimes certain situations do not make us angry, and therein is the key. So regardless of the eccentricities of one's individual responses, you can investigate why is it that certain situations give rise to hostility and anger while other situations do not. And usually it's because we have a very strong expectation that certain situations will not give rise to interference. This is a deep human predicament. We have a very strong expectation that other human beings should not be an interference to us, should not be an obstacle to us, should not be hostile to us. It's very here's an example from real life, since you don't like my fable. Anne, I think her name is Anne Labastier, but I might be pronouncing the last name incorrectly, but she is a wilderness guide in the Adirondacks. And she's lived in the wilderness for a long time. So she described a very interesting event. She'd spent 2 years living in a cabin in the wilderness, very, very little human contact, minimal human contact. She would occasionally go into town and get some supplies, and she was walking through the woods once, and across a pond there was another human being, and all of a sudden all of her antennae were up, And there was a kind of, she described it very vividly, how the peripheral sensorium just went, to that, to that individual. Why is that person there? What are they planning? What are they up to? Should I worry? Should I not worry? How should I approach them? What's interesting because of her experience in the wilderness is that she's perfectly aware that, bears, for example, are dangerous. Bears are very dangerous animals. And they regard human beings as, something that they can get rid of. And that the wilderness itself presents all kinds of dangers. But in her, partly due to her familiarity with the environment, that did not give rise to anxiety or or anger or distrust. She didn't distrust the wilderness. But with other human beings, there was all of a sudden this, uh-oh. There are other descriptions of this that you can read, and that is because we think of human beings as distinct from the rest of nature. And we want human beings, and me too, I want human beings to be part of a community. So it's very frustrating, it's very upsetting when human beings don't behave that way. But it has to do with the thwarting of our expectations. Equanimity is the practice of acceptance that what has arisen has in fact arisen. My judgment won't change that. My desires won't change that. My preferences won't change that. What has arisen has arisen. If you can practice equanimity, that's clarity. Here's an example from a karate teacher. Her name was Stephanie. I studied with her for a few years. So, if you're walking down the street and somebody attacks you, and let's say you're equally matched, other things being equal, her view was the person who had equanimity would win. Okay? And the reason is that if the mind arises like, they should not attack me, that's wrong, why are they doing that? Your mind gets into this, tangle of, maybe later it's worth considering, all that, but at that moment, if there's equanimity as to what has appeared, then it's possible to react very clearly. Once again, equanimity is not acceptance. Don't get confused with the two. So the contrast she made for her students is if you're walking down the street and you hear the cracking of a tree limb and you look up and the limb is falling, you step out of the way. You just do that, without thinking. And that's because you're not, you don't think, how could that tree have done that to me? You don't get, your mind doesn't leap into that terrible, a tangle of expectations, thwarted expectations, judgments, and that sort of thing. And in my own life, my own experience would verify that, and so that's my response, for what it's worth. Thank you. Okay, one more question, then I want to get to the topic of my talk.
Just take this one step further. Throughout my life, I've been sort of in and out of political things, and of late, because there's the war and there's the homelessness, and I have done some work for Sister Bruein with the religious witness. And somehow or other, it's become crystal clear as a problem. How do you get a fierce devotion to justice? That's kind of speaking English Christian talk, I guess. Well, maybe I need to translate that or something. But in order to do something to alleviate human suffering on a sort of non-spiritual but material level, as political movements try to do, usually you need an incentive.
Well, some of them try to do that.
And some do.
Yes.
Yeah. And usually you seem to need an incentive, and can anger be lacking there? Is there a place for anger? Did you talk in a Buddhist very much?
Well, Thich Nhat Hanh writes very beautifully about that. The place of anger in Buddhist practice is that's actually a very good question. And it would depend on the Buddhist tradition. So in some Buddhist traditions, anger is viewed as a hindrance and must be eliminated. And there are specific meditative processes whereby anger is eliminated from one's consciousness. And in other Buddhist practices, anger is considered neither a hindrance nor a blessing. Either way, it is to be treated with neutrality and simply released, let go, along with everything else that appears. So in those traditions, there are no specific meditations to get rid of anger. Anger is treated just as any other phenomena that arises and disappears. And then there are other Buddhist traditions in which it says it depends on the motivation of the anger. And so an example would be if a parent gets angry at a child for running into the street, that is compassionate anger. So and the motivation is to protect the safety of the child. If dad has told the kids not to run in the street 6 times that morning, and then the 7th time they run in the street and dad gets angry, ideally the anger is not about his will being thwarted. His anger is to emphasize that that's a dangerous thing to do, and you need to not do that. In other words, the motivation is communication and clarity and compassion, and concern. So from that point of view, it depends on what is the motivation of the anger. What is the direction of the anger? If the anger is for the benefit of all sentient beings, then that is bodhisattva anger, and so anger can be an expression of compassion. Anger can be an expression of compassion. If anger is simply because your will is thwarted, simply because people are not behaving the way you think they should behave, then that's not constructive anger, because there's simply no end to that. And it's harmful both to oneself and to others. This third view, which I call the path of transformation, throws one back on oneself, and you really have to examine yourself. What is the source of my anger? Why am I angry? What is the meaning of that anger? That would be. There are plenty of resources within the Buddhist tradition for using anger constructively. There's a very beautiful poem by Thich Nhat Hanh called "Please Call Me by My True Names," which deals with this subject. I don't have it with me, but I recommend that you take a look at it if you have a chance. Thank you for the question. I'd like today to talk about the 3 refuges. And last month when I was here, I was talking about how to use a home altar, and one of the things I said was that the pivotal thing which makes a home altar a Buddhist altar is taking refuge. That's whatever you have on your altar, whether you have a Buddha statue or not, whether you have a Bodhisattva statue or not, whether you have water or flowers or fruit or when I was in Korea, people love to put ding-dongs on their altar. Hostess, things like that. So whatever. That's what really makes a Buddhist altar is the taking of refuge. Like that's what transforms an altar, no matter what your particular tradition places on the altar. That is the primal gesture which makes it Buddhist. So the three refuges are: I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, and I take refuge in the Sangha. Are people familiar with the three refuges here? Yes. Okay. No? A little? I'd like to read just two brief passages from two writers about the three refuges. The first one is David Kalupahana, who is a Theravadan. Despite occasional quibbling over details of philosophical interpretation, it is possible to observe an unbroken continuity in philosophical standpoint, which is reflected in the popular and elaborate religious rituals of both the Theravada and the Mahayana traditions. The same is true of the most basic ritual performed by every Buddhist, layman, laywoman, or monastic, whatever their sectarian differences. The basic ritual is generally referred to as taking refuge in the three refuges, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The idea of taking refuge derives primarily from how the so-called three refuges are conceived, so it is important to clarify their meaning before examining the nature and the function of the ritual itself. The reason I read this is that the taking of refuge unites all Buddhist traditions. It's a common core, like that. That lay people engage in it, monastics engage in it, Theravadins, Vajrayanists, Zen Buddhists. You'll find this at the center of every Buddhist tradition. And this is from Sangharakshita. Sangharakshita is the founder of the organization in which we are sitting right now, so I thought it would be appropriate. And he's a very committed Mahayana Buddhist. So the three refuges are also called the three jewels. The three jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the Buddha or enlightened one is meant not only the historical Shakyamuni, the founder of Buddhism, but the ideal of enlightenment, both in its universal aspect and its ultimate reality. The Dharma, or doctrine, is not only the sum total of the Buddha's teachings, but the whole body of moral and spiritual laws discovered and revealed by him. Similarly, the Sangha, or assembly, is the spiritual community of those who, following the Dharma, have attained the same levels of spiritual experience, or observe a common rule of monastic discipline, or simply the whole body of the faithful, going for refuge, enlightened, unenlightened, monastic, lay, men, women. The three jewels are therefore of pivotal importance in Buddhism. Indeed, the three jewels are Buddhism. Let's just. I'd like to talk a little bit about the meaning of refuge. I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, I go for refuge to the Sangha. What is meant by refuge? A refuge is a shelter. In what sense are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha a shelter? And they are a shelter from the difficulties of life. They are a shelter from suffering. They are a shelter from fortune and misfortune. The view in Buddhism is that people are motivated in life to find a refuge from suffering. That's a primary motivation in the human psyche. They look for a refuge because even if it's not conscious, people are aware that life is impermanent, that life is filled with difficulties. So even if it's not explicit, you can't go very far or for very long without that information coming through. And so people strategize to find a refuge from suffering. Some of the common refuges that people choose are wealth, power, youth, those kinds of things. There's a lot of analysis in the Buddhist discourses about why those things don't work. So why acquiring a great deal of wealth is not in fact a refuge. Why acquiring a great deal of power is not in fact a refuge. Again, I'm talking about a refuge from impermanence, or a refuge from old age, a refuge from disease, a refuge, all those kinds of things that we, the more unpleasant aspects of life. Yeah. So the view in Buddhism is that the teachings of the Buddha are in fact a refuge, are in fact a shelter from those aspects of life. So take impermanence. The Buddha taught that there is that which exists, which is deathless and unborn. So the deathless and the unborn is a shelter from impermanence. Now, is it true? Did the Buddha actually accomplish this? We'll get to that. But I'm just trying to explore the meaning of shelter right now. And why this threefold ceremony has taken the particular form, the meaning of refuge. Another meaning of refuge is that a refuge is reliable. So if I'm having difficulty in my life and I call a friend, it's because I think my friend is reliable. So let's say I'm having difficulty at work because, somebody was behaving badly, maybe toward me, maybe just in general. I call my friend because my friend is reliable. I don't think that my friend will, mistreat me or deceive me, that sort of thing. So, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha are refuge in that sense that they are reliable. They're not deceitful. They're truthful. And then there's a meaning of refuge. I call it authenticity, or it's authentic. So, say there's a storm outside, and you see this house, and you open the door, and then you run in, and the front looks great, but there's no roof, So either the roof hasn't been built yet, or maybe the roof has fallen in, So it's not an authentic refuge, There are a lot of inauthentic refuges in the spiritual world today. I'm sure you can think of a few. People who certain spiritual traditions who make promises, that they can't fulfill. That would be an example of an inauthentic refuge. It's not just spiritual groups, but for example, there's, if you take enough vitamin C, you'll live forever. That kind of that kind of rhetoric. That's an inauthentic refuge. So the meaning of refuge here has that sense of being authentic. So when you open the door to the Dharma and you step inside, the roof and the foundation will be solid. Are there questions on that, or just on the meaning of refuge in particular? It's interesting about there's an aspect of taking refuge. There's an aspect of faith in taking refuge, particularly at the beginning. I'm deliberately bringing this up because faith is a touchy subject for a lot of Western Buddhists, because we tend to construe faith in what I call fundamentalist terms, all or nothing terms, that faith means blind faith. But The kind of faith I'm talking about is more akin to trust. Sharon Salzberg just wrote a book called Faith. So Sharon Salzberg, are people familiar with her? She's a teacher at Spirit Rock. Her main practice is metta, contemplation. The subtitle of her book on faith is trusting one's own inner self. So that puts a very different spin on the meaning of faith. So it's necessary to explore this and not just accept the most extreme interpretations of that word. Because the word is actually very rich and has a wide range of meanings, and some of those meanings are very helpful to one's spiritual practice. So I tend to look at faith as trust. At the beginning, taking refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha requires a lot of trust because you don't have familiarity with it. You're going to have to accept other people's words that and other people's view that Buddhism is an authentic and reliable refuge. As one's experience and practice grows, that aspect of leaning on what other people say falls away. Your experience grows and the faith deepens into trust based on experience. So there's two aspects to the trust. One is trusting in the tradition, that what the tradition has to offer is accurate. And then there's also trust in oneself, which is the aspect that Sharon Salzberg emphasizes in her book. The reason both are necessary is that in order to explore the Dharma, if there isn't a basic trust in oneself and one's capacity for understanding the Dharma and a basic trust in one's capacity for spiritual growth, one won't make the first step. This is not difficult to understand. So, for example, let's say that I want to study German. If I lacked trust in myself that I have the ability to do this, I'm simply not going to do it. If I've convinced myself that say I have no gift for languages, or it's too difficult, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make the first step on the path. Or mathematics is a good example. A lot of people regard mathematics as beyond their capacity. So, if you've convinced yourself that that is the case, then you're not going to take the first step. That's why trust and faith in one's own self and capacity is necessary. I would say it's even more necessary than trust and faith in the tradition. Without that crucial element of trust and faith in one's own capacity, it's not going to happen. The problem with trusting a spiritual tradition like Buddhism is that what you're asking to trust is much more subtle than what is being asked, say, in mathematics or German or learning French cooking or something like that. So if I want to learn French cooking, the payoff of learning French cooking is quite concrete, right? So, what is the payoff? What do I get for studying the Dharma? And that's where it gets a little difficult. And so here's the third element that needs to be present, and that is trust in the transcendent. You have to trust that the transcendence is possible, or that awakening to ultimate reality is possible for human beings. Human beings in general, not just some special human being, but that all people have that ability to awaken to the deathless and the unborn. What's the payoff? It will make you very happy. Like that's unhappiness is due to like clinging to the impermanent, right? Clinging to the impermanent. That's the source of frustration and unhappiness. Awakening to the deathless and the unborn is the source of happiness, contentment, equanimity, serenity. And so that's the payoff. There's interesting discourses where the Buddha does talk about this. There's one in particular that I like where he says, "My heart leapt up when I realized the Dharma." My heart leapt up. And a lot of the discourses the Buddha is depicted as kind of cool, a little aloof, kind of. But there's certain discourses where you can tell that he was absolutely thrilled at his discovery. It just was neat. It was very, and trust in the transcendent is based on knowing what to look for. Okay? It's not an experience that you have not had. You've had this experience, but you have to know what to observe. Okay? So, for example, in those situations that you can recall to mind where there has been no clinging, even if it is brief, you can also recall to mind that sense of peace, acceptance, and serenity that goes with that. Now, non-clinging can happen in very ordinary circumstances. One of my favorites is when you're with a good friend that you've known for a long time and you have this afternoon together and it just goes smooth. There's no hindrance. Because you know each other well. You may have even had an argument, but it's not a hindrance. And you can look back on that afternoon with fondness and say, that was really a great afternoon. And then you say, well, why was it so great? Well, I'm not quite sure, but it sure seemed like that's what I mean. You need to know what to look for. Some people kind of have this experience when in nature, like when they're walking in the forest, along the ocean, and that sense of adhesiveness falls away. It's one of the words that Buddha used as a source of suffering. Our consciousness is adhesive. We're always sticking to things. And instead, there's this sense of relaxation. Not induced relaxation. It's our original condition. It's not a hypnotically induced state. It's sort of like, so it's subtle, and that's why it's necessary to know what to look for. But what I'm getting at is the trust in the transcendent does not have to be blind faith. I believe everyone has had that experience to some degree. But once again, you need to go, that's what is meant. That's what is meant. That's where I would like to dwell. That would be a wonderful place to dwell. That would be a wonderful place to live. Are there questions or comments on that?
How do you put your finger on the transcendent? How do you recognize that sensation? What?
The recognition takes place with, first of all, knowing what to look for. And so what you're looking for is that state of non-clinging. Okay? Those situations and those states of mind where clinging is not present. Where clinging is not present, our original nature manifests of its own. And so that's what you're looking for. So the more ordinary, the better. So I've said it many times here, but a very common experience of non-clinging is our state of mind when the sound of a bell ceases. Okay. No regrets, Like we simply allow the sound of the bell to cease. Like there's no clinging to that sound. Sound is the best door to the transcendent. It's the most easily accessible door to the transcendent, in the sense that sound is ordinarily provides us with many examples of non-clinging. Now that's an extremely small glimpse, of this of what is meant by the transcendent. But that's recognition. That's what he means. And after recognition comes cultivation. Cultivation is the path, which is the Eightfold Path. Because now that I know, now that I can recognize what it is, that the Buddha is referring to, that the Dharma is teaching, it's possible to cultivate it. And then after cultivation comes stabilization, in which that state of mind and that awareness, our original condition, becomes our baseline, our ordinary way of relating to the world. Other comments or questions?
I was wondering if you could talk somewhat about, like in Christianity we have the triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and they sort of as a system work together, and they have a lot of theology based on what that all means. I've heard the term the triple gem. In other words, that this as a system is sort of the only way, the most succinct way that you can describe the functioning of the universe and the functioning of beings transcending into awakened nature. That if you focus only on any single one of them, you're led astray.
Right.
You have to see the structures of what's ahead of you, who's with you, and path. At all levels, like even the gods, they need this teaching. The hell realm beings, it's available to them too.
Yeah. If I understand your comment, it's very typical of the Buddha's way of looking at things to distill the components that are necessary for any phenomena. So, for example, human beings are looked at by the Buddha as consisting of 5 skandhas, or 5 aggregates, and those 5 aggregates make up a human being, those 5 factors. So the 3 refuges are a similar approach. What is necessary for a spiritual practice to exist? So you need a teacher, and you need a teaching, and you need a community. If any one of those 3 is not present, it's the spiritual practice, the spiritual presence is not there. All 3 of those need to be present. When all 3 of them are present, a transmission of spiritual understanding takes place. So it's very, as I said, it's very typical of the Buddha to look at things that way, to factor things out. The reason it's typical is because it has to do with the Buddha's understanding of the non-substantial nature of all existing things. Because things lack substance, they're only constitutive of aggregates brought together. But I can tell that I'm really going off on a tangent, so I'll rein myself in at this point. To return to the 3 refuges, and I'll probably continue this discussion next month because I see I'm getting 2. So what I'd like to do is take the refuges one at a time and explore the meaning of each of the refuges. And So the first refuge is I take refuge in the Buddha. Part of the meaning of taking refuge in the Buddha is simply an expression of gratitude and thanks for the fact that the Buddha took the time and effort to propound this teaching to the world. There's a wonderful discourse in the middle-length discourses where the Buddha describes his initial reaction after becoming enlightened, and he was very reluctant to teach. It's actually quite a charming discourse. He said, people will not understand. It is difficult. People are filled with anger, greed, ignorance. He says, it will be a burden to me, to teach them. People are contentious, argumentative. Does this sound familiar? Yeah, we're different now. And then in this discourse, the Brahma Sahampati, one of the Brahma deities, realizes that the Buddha is about to withdraw. He's not going to teach. He's content. He's become enlightened. He is a fully realized Buddha. Maybe he'll go off to the Himalayas. So the Brahma descends and argues with the Buddha, and he says, not all people will misunderstand. He said there are some people, those of little dust, who will understand what you're saying. It is worthwhile. You need to do that. And so the Buddha changes his mind. There's several versions about this story about who approaches the Buddha. And one, the earth goddess arises and argues with the Buddha, and another, some traveling merchants argue with him. But what the common thread is that his initial reaction was that this will be very difficult to communicate. But he did decide to do it, and for the next 40 to 50 years, he taught ceaselessly, clarifying his teaching and expressing it to people, and so for that, we take refuge out of as a way of expressing our gratitude and thanks. For if he had not done that, we would not be here today, meditating and considering the Dharma. So next month when I come, we'll explore more about the meaning of taking refuge in the Buddha. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, James, for the talk and wonderful talk. We have much time. It's fascinating, and especially for fielding a question on anger and share.
Oh, you're welcome.
It can't be emphasized enough when you point somebody does. Simply because from my own experience, it's such a destructive emotion that can cause much trouble. But anyway, the other side, before I introduce our host, I'd like to ask if there's any new people here we want to welcome you. Tony.
My name is Tony, and I'm visiting here from Chicago.
Dennis, a friend of mine. We used to work in the same law firm. We could go on about anger. Secondly, I'm compelled to talk about the Dharma pot. It's a material thing that's very important. The recommended donation is $5. If you can give more, that's fine.
Give more.
It is important, but if you can't afford it, that's fine too. And thirdly, are there any announcements? Yes.
I want to remind people again that the Gay Buddhist Fellowship Thanksgiving potluck will be at my house in Berkeley, and I've put some flyers out there on the table giving directions and information about it.
There's a steering committee immediately following the ending of this meeting, and it'll be in here, and the agenda is short, and please, maybe just a 5-minute break so we can all get out quickly.
Is there any that, I'd like to introduce our host, Gregory.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to be back again. And I think you covered the salient points of business, but we do have some goodies outside as well to enjoy. And it's good to see you.
Would you like to
close? May all sentient existence be well and happy. May all sentient existence be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May good fortune fill all the days of all the lives of all sentient existence. May all sentient existence dwell forever in the limitless realm of the ever-present peaceful heart and serene mind. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.